everyone. My name is Angie Viscianen, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects pre-law students to lawyers for mentoring so that they can learn more about the legal profession before they decide whether or not law school is right for them. And we started doing these Zoom meetups at the beginning of last year just to invite some admissions officers and admissions folks and lawyers and all sorts of people in to come talk to you guys about topics that are going to help you in your legal career. So I'm excited today to introduce to you Dr. Shemmassian, and he's a academic consultant who helps people who are applying to law school. So he's going to be talking to you today about letters of continued interest, since many students are currently in the process of evaluating law schools and figuring out where they will be going in the fall. So Dr. Shemmassian, I'll let you take it away.
I'm really happy to be here and grateful for the invitation. And I know that we're today about sending update letters to school, right? Waitlist letters, letters of interest, of intent. So happy to talk about that today. And my intention really was to ask people for for the questions that they had and keep it a pretty informal discussion. But even if other people don't join, that's okay. I'm happy to sort of talk about letters of interest and letters of intent. But essentially, when it comes to law school admissions, you submit your main application, right, which has all of your essays, your personal statement, your diversity essay, and all this, all your CV potentially, and all this sort of information, and your LSAT scores, demographics, and so on. And a lot of times, when students submit their applications, they're sort of, they're wondering like, okay, what happens next? How long do I wait? If I don't hear back by a certain date, what do I do? And people start getting nervous. And this makes sense because a lot of students who are applying to great law schools, they're high achievers, right? And they're doing something, right? So if you're a high achiever academically, and I say, oh, just hang out and trust the process, that's really difficult for a lot of um, to deal with, right? Because we're constantly doing something, participating in the next extracurricular activity, thinking about all the right courses to take, studying for the next exam, taking the LSAT, prepping for that, very intensely and all that kind of stuff. So this idea of just hang tight and, your time will come and you'll hear back from schools when they're ready, that is really, really uncomfortable for us, right? And so when we're sitting and we're waiting for a decision, or maybe we've made it onto a wait list, um, we're sort of wondering like, well, what do I do next? And when we say, and there's really sometimes nothing to do, and sometimes you can do certain things, right? Of course, on the nothing you can do side, it's you can't really speed up the admissions committee's decisions, right? So they sort of do things on their own timeline. When they're ready, and they're admitting people on a rolling basis, then they will admit people on a rolling basis. And then when they're not ready, they're sort of, they're still working through their, hundreds of applications, if not thousands of applications still on their desk to make the right decisions. So I think first things first, even before we get into, how to send an update letter, like a letter of interest or a letter of intent or something like that, we really have to focus on what you should be doing extracurricularly, right? So that you can have meaningful updates to share. I think a lot of times people focus on X amount of time has passed, should I send in a letter? But that's not necessarily the primary consideration, right? The primary consideration really ought to be, do you have meaningful updates to share? I think that's the critical thing. And when it comes to critical updates, we always want to make sure to continue with extracurriculars. We take the LSAT, etc., things like that. So on the extracurricular front, keep in mind that when you submit your application, it's not like, okay, that's it, the application was submitted and now I go to the Bahamas. You still have to continue all of your experiences. If you're still in school, continue to get great grades. If you're thinking about taking the LSAT, study really hard for that because you're going to send that in as an update. If you're working, at some job, whether you're doing a legal internship, some amazing service experience or something like that, make sure to continue doing that too, because you want to show to law schools that, hey, this isn't just a thing I did to check a box, right? That's a very dangerous game to play. If you're just like doing an experience and then you submit and you stop, it makes it look like you did it just to impress the admissions committee, not because you actually cared about the experience. And so you want to make sure to continue your extracurriculars. Um, If there's an initiative that you're working on, take it to the next level or continue to get those hours, add a service experience, whatever the case might be. Because eventually, when you submit a letter to these people, you're going to want to say, hey, look, I continue to do this work and this is what I'm going to continue to do at your school, which we'll get into in a moment when we're talking about fit. Okay. So that's the thing on the extracurricular front. So keep making sure that you are delivering on the sort of the persona and the overall theme of your application coming into the cycle. So if you're big into like public service going into it, continue doing public service work because you're going to share that in your updates. If you're big on, I don't know, education reform, keep doing that because you're going to deliver that in your update. All right. So what happens? What happens after you submit your application, and now you're sort of like twiddling your thumbs and waiting? Well, not waiting. You're continuing to do your extracurriculars, of course, and potentially academic work. You're gonna find a time where you're gonna get really antsy. Like, okay, I haven't heard back. It's been X weeks. It's been X month. Like, I heard, I read online that so and so got heard back from this school. Why haven't I heard back from school? Does this like a terrible omen? Does it mean I'm not going to get in? And you start, all this chatter starts in your head, and you get really, really antsy, and you feel like you have to do something. So at some point, you might want to send what we call an update letter. Okay, an update letter can mean a bunch of different things. It could mean, I guess, and I'm using the word update letter as sort of a broad term to include things like a letter of interest or a letter of intent. Okay, so those are sort of the two main categories of an update letter. And you can send an update letter at various times. You can send it after you've sent in your admissions decision or your application, but you haven't yet heard back either about a waitlist or rejection or whatever the case might be. It could also be sent after you've heard back, from the school, and you've been placed on a wait list, and you essentially want to update them and say, hey, like, this is what I continue to do, and what have you, right? So let's talk about the different sort of scenarios when you can send a good update letter, when not to send an update letter, and all that stuff. Okay. So first scenario, you submit your application whether or not you've heard back from a wait, whether it's pre-wait list or decision, or you've been placed on a wait list. Okay. If you have something major to share, share it. Okay. So let's say, for instance, trying to think of some example. Let's say you retook the LSAT. When you submitted your application with a 164, and now you got a 175. That's a meaningful update, right? So that's something that would justify sending an update letter. Okay. Or let's say, I don't know, you're part of the military and I don't know, you major medal or some award like that, or the mayor gave you some major award for your commitment to the community or whatever the case might be. That might be, that justifies, a meaningful update, and you can share it. That's like, that doesn't matter how much time has passed. Even if you sent a communication 2 weeks ago, it doesn't matter. It's major enough that it's worth sharing an update then and there. Okay. So that's one reason to do it. um, some other times, not a ton of, I mean, some time has passed, and you're sort of getting, and you're like, well, I want to send some sort of communication. I get some questions from students about, oh, how much time has to pass before I send another update. And time isn't really, again, to be clear, time isn't the number one variable that you should be looking at. The number one variable you should be looking at is meaningfulness of the update. Okay. So if it's super meaningful, right? If the update is super meaningful, time like really goes out the window. If it's less meaningful, but you've continuing good work, and you have some achievements to share and stuff like that, you can sort of shorten the window between communications. In other words, you should think about it like, more meaningful, the less time matters. The less meaningful, the more time matters, right? Because you don't want to say like, hey, I continue to work at my job 2 days a week. You don't want to send something that a week every 2 weeks, because that's just going to annoy people, right? So if it's major, don't worry about time at all. If it's moderate or relatively minor, then take more time to spread out the communications, right? Because you don't want to just do it to say, hey, I'm still here. Like they know that you're still there. You have to make sure to communicate something important to them. Okay. Um, and let's say that you've been placed on a wait list, okay, or you haven't been placed on a wait list, and now you have, you're getting nervous. Maybe you have another acceptance, maybe you don't have another acceptance, and you essentially want to communicate to the school that you love them. All right, so what do you do? How do you send an update letter? So again, two categories. There's a letter of intent and a letter of interest. They're highly similar with one major exception. The major exception being an intent is essentially you say, I will attend if admitted. And interest is just, I remain highly interested in your program. Obviously, intent is stronger than interest. They're both okay. So when one send versus other. So intent is intent, like I said, is the stronger one. So if you're highly confident that if admitted to school A, you will attend school A, send a letter of intent. If you're not sure, or you have sort of two favorites, probably want to hold off on sending intent. You could communicate strong interest in the school, right? And you should only send a letter of intent to one school at a time. Sometimes people try to get clever and send that to multiple schools, but you can get in trouble if folks find out. Okay. So a letter of intent, essentially, you share your updates. You talk about, okay, since submitting my application on X date, I've been doing this is how I want to continue to contribute to this community, and if admitted to your school, I would continue to do this type of work. Okay. And then at the end, basically make a strong statement of intent saying, if admitted to school, I would wholeheartedly attend. And then same thing for the letter of interest, except at the end it would say, I remain highly interested in your program. It would be an honor to attend your school. Basically, you say everything but if admitted, I would attend. So that's the main distinction. Okay. So why do schools even care about intent versus interest? So, acceptance rates and matter in when figuring out rankings and prestige of law schools. But so too does the yield rate. Okay, so yield rate is basically a term that means the percentage of students who were admitted to that school who decided to attend. Okay, so basically the lower the acceptance rate, the more prestigious it is. The higher the yield rate, the more prestigious the school is. Okay, so let's take in a school like Stanford Law or something like that, right? Really tough to get into, low acceptance rate. uh, when people get into Stanford Law, they're reasonably likely to attend because it's so prestigious and desirable. So high yield rate, right? Versus if you have a school that admits 50% of applicants or something like that, but I don't know, 10% only decide to attend, that's not great for them. So when you express intent to the school, they're saying, oh, if we admit this person, they're going to attend, and that will boost our yield rate, which basically boosts our desirability, right?
Yeah, is your strategy for, as far as
Yeah.
timing goes, for a letter of intent any
Yes.
different than for a letter of continued interest?
Not really, because like it's different in fields. Okay, it's different in fields that require an interview. With law, it's tricky because not every school will require an interview, so that makes it a little more murky. In another field that requires an interview, you don't want to send a letter of intent before you've interviewed,
Right,
typically,
right.
because that's sort of like you're just kind of like, ooh, I just really want to get in here, like here's a letter of intent. But with law, it's tricky. Like if it's been some time, I don't know, month, 2 months, you're just like you're doing work that strongly aligns, then I think delivering intent is fine. But I also wouldn't wait like forever because it's on a rolling admissions basis. So that's why you have to make a judgment between how strong you are and how strong the school is. Because if you have like a, I don't know, let's say a 3.5 and a 162, and like you submit to Yale, and 2 months later or like a month later you're like, I would enroll if I got in. Of course you would, like that you're punching above your weight, so to speak. And so you have to be thoughtful about all these factors. I think a lot of times, Angie, like students ask questions about like, well, I want to attend here, this much time has passed, should I send a letter of intent? There are so many details that go into this stuff. What's the strength of your profile, your stats, your extracurriculars? How hard is the school? What updates do you have to share? All that kind of stuff that goes into it. So this is why when I'm talking, I'm trying to give like a bunch of different considerations in making this decision. It seems like you might have a follow up question.
I guess just as you think about the content of the letter of
Mhm.
intent or the letter of continued interest, when you have an update to share, what are some examples of meaningful updates that you can share? I mean, I know you shared a couple of examples of those, updated LSAT score, change in GPA, those types of things. Is there anything else like if you had talked to one of their students or talked to somebody in the admissions office or talked to a professor about a specific program that you wanted to do at the school, are those significant enough to write about?
They're not significant enough in and of themselves to justify a letter. Would they be good to include as part of a letter that has more significant updates? Yes. Because if you if it's like the hmm, let's just think about the admissions committee for a minute. They have thousands of applicants, all, limited time, all this kind of stuff. If you're like, hey, school, like, been a minute. I've, talked to one of your students and I remain highly interested, still here. Like, that's not going to be that's not going to nudge, right? Because our goal is to nudge your application from like floating into the accepted pile, right? And so that's the key thing here. And I would say like a significant enough, like, okay, boost in LSAT score, I think would make sense. Big jump in GPA, although, the time between you submitted and that, like, it's not usual that like you'll see a major GPA jump or something like that. So that's more of like a little detail addition to a larger letter. I don't think in and of itself it justifies one. I would say like extracurricular achievements are the number one thing, whether you won a prize for something or you made like a big achievement in your community or something like that. But the big key when writing letters of continued interest or or intent or something like that really are the sort of the fit between you and the school. And sort of that was sort of like next big thing I want to talk about, because you don't want to just say, hey, school, just reaching out, since my last communication on X date, here's all the stuff that I've done, I remain interested. You don't want to do that. You essentially want to say, I've done this, and this makes me especially excited for the program you guys have. I've done that, and I intend to continue my work with Professor X, who does work on A, B, and C at your school. Essentially, making it a matter of fit. I don't like, for instance, the way the sort of analogy I like to use, Angie, it's kind of silly, but I think it makes the point. It's sort of like dating, right? If someone asked you like, why do you want to be with me or something like that, it would be weird to just say, I really enjoy hiking. I climbed I don't know, Mount Whitney in California, and therefore I want to be with you, right? That sounds really weird. But if it was like, yeah, I mean, I love hiking, I've done it. You love hiking. And, like, I just see us like being really adventurous together. That's like a big thing. And then there's like, I just see like so many commonalities, just the future we're looking to build. You want this kind of family. I want this. So basically, you're talking about fit. When students do the thing where they're just like, so in the past 2 months, I did A, B, and C. I want to go to your school. It's like someone asking you, well, why do you want to be with me? Because I'm like this, I'm like this, I'm like this. It's about you, and the connection isn't there. The key is when you say, I have done X, Y, and Z. Y'all offer basically X, Y, and Z. Look how happy we would be together, right? Because people are always saying like, I want to come to this school because of your world renowned faculty, this resource, that resource, whatever. That's only me focused. What do they want? They want to know that if you come there, you will help them further their initiatives too. What's in it for them? And that's why fit matters. It's the same exact thing when you're applying for a job. How many cover letters have you seen, Angie, where the person just says, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. I'm interested in a job with your firm. And it's just like, versus like, ooh, I read your like white paper on this topic. I think it's exceptional that, I don't know, like that you're looking to reform the tort process for this and this community or something like that. And this is the kind of work that I've done too, and I'm highly interested in this internship because I think we can do this thing together. How much more personal and fitting is that second example versus the one who just says, I've done all this kind of stuff, now give me a job.
Totally agree. I think, definitely when you're trying to express your interest to the school, it has to show them like what's in it for them. Ultimately at
Yeah,
the end of the game, these schools are looking for ways to enrich their student body. They're trying to think of where do you fit in the student body? Are you going to bring a different perspective? Are you going to, bring something special that's going to drive the dialogue for other students there? Do you have the same values as this school? Are you going to be a good representative of this school, right?
exactly.
So all the things that you're saying, I completely agree with. I was also wondering, okay, for updates as far as if you get accepted to other schools and they give you scholarship offers and things like that of that nature, is that worth writing about?
Yes. Um, and this one's also very tricky because I think there are two sort of questions here. One is for admissions, one is for financial aid, and I'm happy to dig into both of these things. So what do I mean by admissions? I mean admissions, you might tell a school, hey, I got into this one to make yourself more attractive for this one. Financial aid is, hey, they're giving me this much, I want you to give me this much, right? So let's break down, because those are two different questions. Okay, the admission side of things. And by the way, I'm going to speak very bluntly today because I want to like give people like the real sort of scoop on this stuff. Um, if you're gonna try to look more attractive to a school because you by telling them you got into this other school, that other school better be as prestigious or more prestigious than the other school. Okay. Let me give you an example. If you reached out to Harvard Law School and you said, hey, Harvard Law School, you know, just want to let you know I got into Regional Montana College of Law. Don't you want me to? They're going to be like, okay. Like that again, that doesn't make you more attractive to them. But if it was like, I got into Yale and Stanford, but I really want to attend Harvard for these reasons, now we're talking, right? That matters in a different way. And so you have to be thoughtful about like the tier of the school and what it is you're communicating, right?
What if
That's
you take like these schools that are kind of lower tiered? So say you're kind of a middle of the road applicant, you have a average GPA, you have a very average LSAT score, and you're
yeah,
shooting for, some regional schools. And because I think those are kind of the extreme cases,
yeah.
the Harvard,
And I'm
Stanford,
saying it
Yales
to
of the
make a
world.
point. Of course,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so what if you're shooting for something kind of middle of the road, regional school, still strong in reputation, but not I guess would they care if you got accepted to other, regional schools in other states or
If you're competitive for if you're competitive for their program, yes, because at the end of the day, like law schools also want to recruit the best people they can recruit, right? Because if it's a school that's like you said, middle of the road or something like that, they still want students who are um who are going to essentially be brag worthy, right? So schools want to admit the best people because they want to say 10 years later, 20 years later, that person, that famous person, they came to our school, right? So if you get into other schools, let's say, um, and again, nothing against Regional Montana College of Law, this fictitious school, but like let's say you're from that region, you want to stay in that region, you want to contribute to that region, but then you got into Regional California College of Law, and you're like, look, yes, I really appreciate that and all that kind of stuff, but this is where I want to build my, my career and my practice and all this kind of stuff. Like, in essence, like, you should give them stuff that makes them believe, A, you're going to attend if admitted. So again, improves their yield rate. And also that, look, I'm gonna, look, this is all the great stuff that I'm gonna do here, right? And obviously, if your stats are way above what a school accepts, they might even be willing to give you a lot more financial aid because they're trying to recruit you to their school. So yes, it matters. But essentially, the goal is like, the higher your stats, the more weight your letters will have. The more prestigious your other acceptances, the more you can use them as leverage, right? That's sort of like the general rule here. Does that answer your question, Angie?
Yeah, and I think
Sounds good.
some of my students have had this experience where once they get accepted to one school, all of a sudden the others start to fall like dominoes. And because in a way, once, like, especially if they're all kind of in that same
Of course.
prestige bucket, right? Because there's something to be said for, when somebody else wants you, that makes you, more
Yeah.
appealing, I guess.
Yep. That's very true. That's very true. And then the thing is too, like, they have their timelines, and schools tend to have similar timelines, right? And oftentimes, like, sometimes higher tier schools might wait longer because they're like, we have the luxury, people will attend here once we admit them, even if they paid a deposit elsewhere. So some schools that are more like middle of the road, if you will, might sort of try to recruit you early. This happens in sports too, right? If a
Hmm.
school, if you're trying to get a really great athlete, but at like a lesser known school, you're going to send your offer letter really early because you're like, I want to show them that I really wanted them from the beginning, and you're trying to impress the student. So there's so much there's a whole game to this. It's not just like, it's not them just saying, haha, we hold all the power and we'll admit when we want. Well, schools that are less prestigious recognize that they're less prestigious and they might have less power. So how do they increase their leverage? They might admit you early, give you more financial aid, basically make it harder for you to turn them down, right? And so that's how they use different resources.
Totally. So can we talk about that second scenario? Okay, now let's talk about financial aid.
Yep.
If a school has offered you scholarship money, what should you say in your update letter?
Yeah. So essentially, you can talk about, first of all, don't just make it about money. Okay. If you reach out and say, hey, Regional Montana College of Law, like Regional California College of Law, gave me X dollars, hoping you can match this. Thanks. Okay. Um, you wanna think about a few things. Number one, always talk about updates and fit. Okay. Because you still want to say, like, look, I'm not just doing this. This isn't just a finance. I genuinely want to come here. Like, I'm humbled by this other offer, but I really want to come here. So provide updates. I've been doing X, Y, and Z. You guys offer X, Y, and Z. Da, 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 da. Also, FYI, or so, like, I remain highly, highly interested and will enroll if admitted. Or maybe you've been admitted at both schools, right? Because oftentimes when we're talking about financial aid, we're talking about, you've been admitted at both places. Still, describe fit. I truly believe this will be the right home for me. I'm writing to let you know also that I was admitted to, some other schools, and at this school, I've received, a financial aid offer of this. You guys have offered me this much. Um, Again, this is where I see myself most, where I think I can contribute in these amazing ways. Um, would you know it would be wonderful if you would consider bringing my financial aid to match. If so, I will 100% attend. Right, so you can basically use your leverage. I got into this other place and they're giving me this much money, and say intent, right? So now you're really talking, because you're gotten into both places. So you're not trying to like really impress anymore. Well, you are a little bit, because you want them to boost their financial aid offer. And you're saying, look, I've gotten to both. It's just the money thing. Do the money thing. You're assured of me going. It just strengthens the intent. But don't just make it about money. Make sure to always continue to provide like fit level updates.
Definitely. I had a student in last year that, especially during COVID times when law school admissions was totally insane, nobody knew who was going where.
Yep.
Nobody really knew, if everyone was going to have classes in the fall in
Yep.
person or if it was going to be online, and I
Yep.
think there was a lot more movement last year between schools because decisions were coming out later and things were more up in the air. And, I had a student that got a bunch of offers, but her top choice school gave her, of course, the least amount of money, but it wasn't terribly more prestigious than some of the other schools that she'd got into. So she wrote back a letter and she wrote, had a little table of all the schools she'd gotten into, the amount of scholarship offers, the percentage of tuition that amounted to for each school, and just said, like, listen, you're my top choice school, but I have to pay for law school
Yep.
all on my own. I really don't have a lot of financial
Yep.
resources. I want to go to your school, particularly because of these programs, but your school is also the only out of state school that I applied to. And that would require, in normal times, me moving there, all this stuff, it would be more expensive. So could you please just increase it just a little bit more so I can afford it compared to all these other places?
Yep.
And they ended up giving her a full ride.
Yep.
So, I
Not
mean,
surprised. Yep.
yeah, and I think that you have definitely the right perspective that if you're going to be writing about money, don't make it only about money. It has
Yeah.
to be something else, significant of, okay, why do you really want to go there? And what is this money really going to enable you to do? And why do you need that money?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing. That's again such strong fit. This is where I want to go. It's just I look, I'm not just trying to be difficult. I just can't, like that's a really, and you've been admitted already, so they want you. It's a really compelling thing.
mhm.
So that's really great, really powerful example. Thank you,
Yeah.
Andrew. Yeah.
Sure. So I think the other question that I get, really often is, okay, so if you wrote back to them, about a month ago,
Yep.
and maybe it's now super, super late in the admission cycle and you still haven't heard back, and you're having to start to make decisions, putting down seat deposits at other places, like, and you still don't have a great update to send. What do you do?
If you don't have a great update to send, I mean, you can reach a little bit if you're like, but again, you're gonna be limited by the strength of your update, right? If you don't have meaningful updates to share, then you should send fewer, so that the one you do send is more powerful. If you have not that many meaningful updates, but you share a lot of them, each one's gonna be just like, hey, still here. Like it's not gonna do anything for you.
But are
So
there
that
other ways that you could meaningfully interact with the school other than send an update letter?
Yeah, I mean, you can like reach out to the admissions office and ask about specific programs, maybe reach out to the faculty members and all that kind of stuff. But again, these won't be nearly as powerful as achievements. So it's just, yes, you can have updates, yes, you can send updates, but the question is not just when can you or what can you, but it's the meaningfulness of the communication that you provide always.
Yeah, I think, but one thing is that I think that they should really make sure that um they don't let too much time go by where there's like no activity at all and then they're not taking the time to get to know the schools, because
Yes.
if you're on 10 wait lists at different schools and you're not really taking more time to get to know any of those schools, and then all of a sudden you get 5 offers at the end of summer and nothing else, then like you're going to have to make a decision pretty fast. And if you haven't been doing things up to that time to help you better evaluate those schools, you're going to be in a lurch, right? So I think, even throughout that time, just realize, like, even if you don't have meaningful updates to send, you should be spending that time trying to get to know that school better, maybe talking to some of their alumni or talking to some of their students or reaching out and asking if you could do a virtual tour or something like that, just to like get to know these schools better. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing. That's why I started the conversation even before I got into details about when and what to write. Focus on your work. That's number one. Like, do things. Extracurriculars. Learn more about the school. Connect with alumni. All this kind of stuff, because most people, unfortunately, what ends up happening is like Well, it's been 2 months, and I want to say something. So, what they start the work when they're nervous.
Hmm.
Start the work. Don't ever stop the work. Right? Always do great work. It makes everything else easier. If you're like, it's been a long time, but I don't have any updates, like maybe I should reach out to, okay, by the time you find the right person, by the time you communicate, now in a few more weeks that it just like, and the updates aren't as meaningful. You're just, so that's why you have to be planful months ahead of time about like, what am I going to continue doing into my application year, because then the details take care of themselves, right? You should be proactive, learn more about the school, all that kind of stuff, continue doing extracurriculars, achieve big things. And then when you share, oh, I've done all this stuff and I've communicated with your school and representatives and alumni, whatever, I just, everything I do just makes me increasingly excited about your school. I don't know how else to put it, but you guys are, you know what I mean? Like, that's the message. Um, and that's why I thought that the first thing that I should share, though, that's most important, is continue doing impressive things.
Wonderful. Well, I'd love to go ahead and take any questions from the students if you guys have any. Feel free to drop them in the chat box if you want, or just, unmute yourself and ask away. Um, you've got Dr. Shemmassian on the call, and he's willing to be up frank and open with you. So ask away.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay,
I can.
awesome. First, thank you both for doing this afternoon. It's greatly appreciated, definitely on my end. I actually just received two letters yesterday from one was from my top choice, and then another was from another school I applied to, saying I was on the wait list. I've been waitlisted, which honestly, for me, I'd rather have wait list than a no. So I'm like, if I'm waitlisted, I'm still in the game. So, but I wanted to get on this call because my top choice, they're asking that you do write a letter of continued interest. And so I've heard you talk about, if you don't have updates, or if you don't have anything, big to include in that, then it's kind of like, what can you do to nudge you forward? So that's basically my question. I don't really have any big updates. I'm not your typical law student. I've been out of college for 10 plus years now. So I'm just trying to figure out, what can I really include
Yeah.
in outside of, why I'm interested in the school specifically, and outside of the things that I've kind of already explained in my personal statement. What else should I be looking to include?
Okay. What are you doing right now? Like, what have you been doing since you submitted your application?
Yes, so I am actually a news reporter, but I'm transferring out of that field and into law. So I'm kind of in this transition where I've been doing freelance reporting for the last year. And so that's what I'm doing, as well as being involved in like community organizations in my community here that kind of focus on just community development and areas of interest that I have. So I kind of wrote about that in my letter. But for the most part, that's what I've been doing since starting this process.
When you say your letter, do you mean your personal statement or like a separate
Yes,
update letter?
I I wrote an addendum where I talked about a couple of things as far as just how long I've been out of school, the transition, but I also briefly touched on it in my personal statement when
Got it.
I specifically talked about why I was interested in this school.
Got it. Okay. I would continue to talk about what you have been doing since you submitted your application, right?
Okay.
So between, let's say you submitted your application. Again, I'm just using a random date, January 1st.
Mhm.
Then, whatever you've been doing between January 1st and March 2nd, that's what you would share. I continue to do X, Y, and Z. Recently we organized an event for this cause,
Okay.
and there was this kind of turnout, and what we're looking to do is, A, B, and C. But also, I also I'm continuing to do freelance reporting. I'm focusing on these subjects, and there's really a connection between the work that I'm reporting, or the areas that I'm reporting on, and the types of laws that I really want to pursue. And your school has these programs that I'm just increasingly excited about. I just really think that I can bring my background in community organizing, and also reporting, to explore this stuff in an investigative way, and make sure that we're achieving justice for X, Y, and Z communities.
Awesome. Okay.
I think that this law school would be the right home for me to pursue that work. If admitted, just I would definitely attend, because this is where I want to build my sort of the start of my legal career. Does that
Okay.
give you a sense?
Yes, actually, that's the way my brain was working over here as you've been talking. But I just
Good.
wanted to make sure I was going down the right path.
Yeah, of course.
But
Well, either we're both right or we're both wrong. I'm gonna say it's
we'll
the
see.
former. I'm glad we're of similar mind.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Who would you usually address the letter of continued interest to?
If there's a specific person in the admissions committee that has been in contact with you, you can say, "Dear so and so," and admissions committee members. Otherwise, if you don't know anybody there, you can say, "Dear, you know, law school admissions committee member." Obviously, put the specific name of the law school's admissions and write it like a proper like cover letter, right? Like, the addresses, the dates, dear such and such, introduce who you are, put your applicant ID, basically make it easy for them to put it into your file.
And would you have some people use like a ray line would you use a ray line that says like letter of intent versus letter of interest or anything like that?
I don't. You could. I wouldn't argue with anybody for doing something like that. I would say, like, in the first sense, you can say, I'm such and such, and I'm writing to provide some updates on, what I've been doing since my last communication with your school, and also to reiterate my interest in attending your program. Essentially, you're framing what the letter is going to be about. I think that would be sufficient, and then go into the updates, and then, and again, don't do the thing where you're like update, 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 fit statement at the end when you talk about interest. I like to do update, fit, update, fit, update, fit, because at that point, essentially, it's like, otherwise it's like you're reading updates, updates, update. You're like, as the reader, you're like, where's this going? And then they're like, and I want to attend your school. And I'm like, okay. Versus if I'm saying update, fit, you're like, I could see that. Update, fit, I could see that. Update, fit. And then at the end, intent, like, yeah, makes sense. They told me the whole time, right? So it's just like I just think the flow is nicer that way. There is no like jarring ask at the end. It's more like you're building up to it very clearly.
Yeah. And just to be clear, so these updates should be other things that are making your application stronger, but you
Yep.
shouldn't be redoing any parts of the application, right?
No, I don't. You don't write a new essay. That's a big no. They're like, well, I submitted this other essay to this other school, and I'm gonna add that. Don't do that. This is a fit letter. It's essentially a cover letter.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I guess I know that letters of continued interest and stuff are used in undergrad institutions too. Is there any significant difference between law school and undergrad?
It's
when
gonna be.
writing?
I mean, the idea is the same, right? Updates fit, updates fit, statement of interest or intent, right? That's essentially the framework, and this applies for all areas of admissions. We've been focusing on law, of course, during this call, but the same thinking applies across programs, types, levels of programs.
I do have one more
Yeah.
quick question, and it's kind of on the flip side of our conversation. So I received the waitlist offers, but I also received 2 acceptances. But one of the acceptances, I know that I'm not going to go to that program. So do you recommend that I send them an email of, thank you, but I'm going to humbly decline type thing?
That would be kind of you to do, and I would encourage that, because
Okay,
someone else is waiting for a spot at that school, so it's
right.
the courteous thing to do. First off, congrats on 2 acceptances. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
um the one thing I want to say, though, before you say no to the school: if the school
Mhm.
that you're ready to say no to has offered you significant financial aid, and you want to use it as leverage to negotiate financial aid with other schools, don't yet turn them down.
Okay.
You
I did
can
not
use
think
that
about
as,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know the
Okay.
financial aid situation at those schools, but I want you to think about it.
No, that's a very good point because I had planned on using that. So I'm glad you just reminded me of that. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, because the fewer options you have, the less leverage you have.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, do you have any other general advice for candidates as they're waiting to go to law school? Anything else that you would advise?
No, I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, Angie, but it's always thinking ahead, right? Like when you, and this is in work, this is in business and all this kind of stuff. Don't do things when you need to do them, right? Be very planful, and think of the admission cycle not as something that's discrete where you work up to it, you submit and it's over, but it's something. The admissions process is the moment you decide you're going to pursue law all the way up till the point where you enroll in that program, right? So make sure to just continue doing that, build relationships, do extracurricular work, plan things out, and yeah, and just always think about what's in it for them. I think that's one of the just rule in life. I feel like is a really valuable, like what's in it for them. That if you do that and you think about other people first, I think you'll end up doing pretty well for yourself too.
And just a note about this admission cycle, I've heard a lot about how competitive it is and how how anxious a lot of students are that
Yes.
there's so many more applicants this cycle and everything. If students don't end up getting into any of their choice schools, would you encourage them to apply again?
Tough. I mean, there are arguments to be made on both sides, right? The first argument is, well, if you're going to have more rejected students from this past cycle, is it possible you're also going to have more reapplicants than ever? Might be true. Or but but regardless, what I would say is always make your decision on whether to apply during a given cycle on based on the strength of your materials. Um, the the best applicants do just fine in any climate. That's what I've observed over the years in every single field. I don't care if, a meteor hit us, it's a pandemic, it's just a financial crash, doesn't matter. Like applicants who are well prepared and who have a strong profile at the time of application, they tend to do quite well. So again, focus on building the strongest possible profile because, applications don't open up really until later this year anyway for the next cycle. So you still have plenty of time to boost your profile and be
Yeah.
impressive.
I will note though that if you happen to apply late in the cycle,
Yep.
that could have a huge, impact on your
Yep.
level of success. So if you have, pretty decent scores, if you say you took the LSAT very, very early on in the
Yep.
cycle and then you just, eventually you were able to raise it up significantly, you might want to reapply the next cycle with that stronger package. Now that you have a, higher score and everything, it could significantly impact your chances in the next round. And what I didn't realize is that there are many people that apply to law school in several cycles. I think I was always of the mindset that I should just be so thankful if I got accepted to anywhere at all and I should just go, and that's just a total wrong mindset to have. I mean, I think it varies from cycle to cycle how
Yep.
competitive it is. It also varies how early you get your applications in. I definitely think that it's worth trying more than once, especially if you
Sure.
have scores that are within the medians of most schools. Now, if you're like way, way lower than most schools, you might not fare very well in any cycle. But if you have scores that are pretty decent, and you just applied late in the cycle, your chances could be way better if you just applied
Yep.
earlier.
Exactly. And so like, yeah, always do a critical like postmortem. What people always try to say, oh, it was my stats. Oh, it was my did. But then if you have multiple problems, lower stats, late submissions, mediocre essays, poor rec letter, now it becomes hard. But the silver lining there is you have a lot of improvement points, right? So if you did everything well, but you just submitted so late, well then improve your essays and submit earlier, right? And so my advice for like what to do as a reapplicant is always going to vary based on what you did last time.
Sure. And then I guess if you could provide, your contact information and stuff to the students in case they're interested in using your
Sure.
services in the future,
Sure.
I'd be happy to circulate those around. So just send everything that you want me to send to them, and I'll go ahead and send out a follow-up email to all the registrants with all
Yeah.
your info.
That would be great. So yeah, I mean, the best place to reach, I mean, our site, shemmassianconsulting.com. I don't know if you have like a show notes or a description, but I'm sure you can link to stuff there. I can share some resources too on like the personal statement, diversity statement, things like that. And it's very easy to contact us on our site. At the top it says contact, and you can fill
Perfect.
out a
Yeah, I
form.
have so when
Yeah,
we post your recording in the description, I'll
cool.
put all of those resources. So
Terrific. Yeah, I'll send those your way. And but yeah, you'll if you reach out on that contact form, I'm the one who personally reads and responds to things. So it would be a treat to be a resource to everybody.
okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your
My
time today. I
pleasure.
really
Thank you for having
appreciate
me.
you being
Yeah,
here. So
appreciate it, Angie.
everybody, be sure you come back for Thursday's meetup. We're actually going to be talking about now, once you've gotten accepted to law school, how do you build a strong academic foundation to survive your first year?
Yep.
So Michael Gilfound will be here talking about first year study strategies. And in case you don't do very well in your first semester, how do you bring it up in your second semester? So be sure to stop on by, and I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday.